Hello and welcome to another AfterMaths episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. With me, Jon Cripwell.
It's me, Becky Brown.
Hello again, Becky. How are you? What have you been up to this week?
Hey, Jon. Yes, it's been another very busy week here. It seems a very busy time of the year. I think people, back into routines after Christmas. So really busy working on some new exciting projects. Lots going on for me in the world of Twinkle and just a busy life at the moment, actually, for January. How's your week been, Jon?
It's been really good, Becky. Busy, as you say. I have been, at the weekend, I had the pleasure of presenting a workshop and attending the Thinking Deeply About Primary Education conference in London, which is brilliant, organised by Kieran Mackey and the team at Alter Education, and just a really nice, it was at a primary school, Hawley Primary School in Camden, and just a really nice opportunity to meet up with lots of like-minded people. I met Kate, who did the multiplication podcast, Times Tables podcast for us just recently, so it was lovely to see her again. And a couple of people that we've got coming up on the podcast, actually, episodes either to be recorded or have been recorded and not released yet, including Dr. Sam Parks talking about games in maths and gamifying maths, and Joe Austin talking about manipulatives as well. So I went along to their sessions as well. So that was really nice. And then afterwards, I got to go out into, when they released us, I got to go out into Camden Town. And I'd never been to Camden when I've been to London before. I tended to do, the Westminster and Oxford Street and those sorts of places around London and things. I'd never been into Camden, obviously heard about it. I absolutely loved it, Becky. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but...
I've never been, Jon. So tell me about it. What was it like?
Well, you've got the High Street, and Hawley Primary School is sort of parallel, just on the street behind the High Street. So it was really, really close to the High Street. And you've got the High Street, which is bustling and full of quirky shops that are all mostly seem to be sort of independent shops rather than lots of chains and things like that. And on the outsides of the buildings, on the facades, a lot of them have got sort of art and decorations and stuff kind of coming out of the tops of the buildings. Like one of them that was a shoe shop had an enormous boot that was kind of on the outside of the building and things. And then as you walk up the High Street from the tube station towards the lock, there's a lock, a canal part of Camden and Camden Lock, and there's the market there. And then there's sort of an indoor part of the market as well that used to be stables and things, which is just full of, again, all sorts of independent traders and things. Loads and loads of street food. It was just, lots to look at, lots to see, so much colour, and probably huge amounts of maths going on as well, if we want to bring it back to that. But essentially, I had a really nice day out in London and in Camden, thinking about education, and then, being overwhelmed by the sights and sounds of Camden. But I would definitely recommend it next time you're in London. Go and have a wander up Camden High Street and have a look through the shops and the stables and things. Brilliant. Really, really nice.
It sounds lovely.
Enough about us, Becky. What are we talking about this week?
So, Jon, we're going to start with scaffolding and adaptations, which are two words that I'm sure every teacher has heard with probably increasing regularity over recent months. We've also got some of your stories about children and money. Sorry, your listeners' stories about children and money following last week's AfterMaths episode on the topic.
Looking forward to those.
And Jon, you have some interesting history of maths for us with a little bit of mystery that needs unravelling.
I certainly do, yeah.
And finally, we'll talk some quick takeaways from this week's interview episode on problem solving with Tom Manners and Steve Lomax.
Yeah, that was a great episode. I really enjoyed recording that one, even if we did record it before Christmas. So those of you watching on YouTube might notice that Tom is wearing a Christmas jumper. He isn't just failing to update his wardrobe in January. We did record that before Christmas. But a really good episode. Right up your street, Becky, when it comes to problem solving. So I'll be interested to hear what you thought about it. But there is loads to cover. So let's get cracking, shall we, a little bit with scaffolding. So the reason that I thought that we'd put this in this week, Becky, was because scaffolding is something that is talked about a lot, and scaffolding as a verb to do some scaffolding in a lesson, but also scaffolds as nouns. People talk about, is there a scaffold in place for this child or whatever? And I'm concerned, Becky. I'm slightly concerned with the direction of travel a little bit, particularly in maths, I think, with how we're talking about scaffolds and scaffolding and then adaptations as well. So I thought it might be worth just unpicking a little bit what traditionally we mean by scaffolding, because it's not a new term. It's been around a very, very long time. And, Vygotsky was talking about scaffolding in terms of his zones of proximal development and things. So it's certainly not a new term, but it seems to be one that's come back into the teaching zeitgeist, as these things do, don't they? We go in a very circular pattern sometimes in teaching, I think.
We do. I like to think of it more as a spiral, John. I feel like we go round in circles, but we've learnt a little something from the time before.
Oh, I thought you
Hopefully.
just meant we were spiraling. Just spiraling now.
Well,
Spiraling
that
out of
too.
control and down.
That too.
Yeah, well, let's spiral up instead. Let's be positive.
Yes.
Because scaffolding is great, and the thinking about how we are scaffolding learning, I think, is really important. So, when we're thinking about scaffolding, I think what we should be thinking about. Well, let's take it to an analogy. I love an analogy.
Yeah.
So, the reason it's called scaffolding is because the idea is borrowed, obviously, from construction and from building sites and things. And on a building site, I mean, I've not worked on one for more than a day, which just about killed me. And I thought, no, that's too much like hard work. I'll go into teaching instead. Little did I know. But on a building site, scaffolding is obviously erected and put up so that the builders can work to places that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to reach. Now, somebody said to me last week, that's the thing about scaffolding. It's put up for everybody, all of the builders, all of the construction workers on the site, the joiners, the bricklayers, everybody. I'm running out of, this is the limit of my knowledge of construction now, Becky, but, people working on the roof and things, whoever needs it, it is there for them. It is not reserved just for those working on the site who are not very good at climbing. So, nobody's saying, oh, look, there's Dave. He does rock climbing in his spare time. He's brilliant at this. He doesn't need scaffolding. We don't need to put any up there. Everybody gets the scaffolding, don't they? Everybody has it. And then when it's not needed anymore, when we're working on other bits, or we've come down to a height that you don't need scaffolding anymore, it's removed. And I think that analogy flows into teaching quite nicely. The scaffolding should be things that are put in place for everybody, for every learner in the class. And then when it's not needed anymore, that's the point where it's slowly removed. So when we're thinking about scaffolding, it might just be thinking about something as simple as recapping prior learning so that we can help make connections to previous things. It might be something like STEM sentences to help us, all of us, everybody in the class, to help us to articulate our thinking and to use some of that vocabulary that we're going to use. It could be the working wall that's put up there. It could be a particular representation that the teacher has chosen to use. But what it isn't is something that is put in place for a specific child to help them with overcoming a very specific barrier that they might have. That, I think, is more of a specific adaptation for that child, and it's very specific, and it's not something that's rolled out wholesale to everybody. So is that does that make sense to you, Becky, or have I gone off on a weird tangent here with my analogy?
No, that makes total sense. And actually, it seems obvious to think about it as far as scaffolding comes from. I mean, we talk about where words come from all the time. I mean, this is an obvious one, isn't it?
That's
It
right.
comes from scaffolding. And I think the analogy is brilliant at actually really picking apart what scaffolding is, and that it is a temporary solution. And the length of time it's used for might vary, but it is a temporary solution. It's not a permanent addition to somebody's toolkit that they might need to access something. It's for everybody as and when they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think concrete manipulatives are a great example of this. So it's something that we encourage all children to use because it's going to help take this abstract idea and make it something physical and concrete that we can actually move around and, as the name suggests, manipulate. And then, but we don't want them to always be using that, do we? It's not a tool to solve the problem. It's a way of understanding the concept. So at the point where they understand the concept, we should be looking to move beyond the manipulatives, and whether that's towards a different representation or whether it's straight to the abstract, I don't think matters. That's a judgment call. But the
Yeah, I
point
think that
is that the manipulatives do need taking away. That scaffolding does need taking away. Otherwise, as we've said before, Becky, it becomes a crutch, doesn't it?
yeah, that fading is really important, isn't it? How to do it and how quickly to do it. I think I did some monitoring years ago now, and I was talking to some children who, in this particular school, the children were set across a lot of different classes. So I was talking to the children whose set had been really focused on using manipulatives, and they could show me with the manipulatives their wonderful calculation. But that was all really. They couldn't really talk about what they were doing or why they were doing it. And it was great. They were so proud of being able to do it. But at some point, that needed to move away from the use of the manipulatives towards something else. And I think that is really important. And knowing how and when to do that is quite difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that, I think that is more of a judgment call, potentially one for the whole class, but it could be groups of children or specific children. You're ready now to move on to looking at this in a more abstract way. That's fine. And when we talk about greater depth, sometimes that's one of the ways that we might begin to challenge pupils to think about things in greater depth. It could be a supplementary question that we ask to an individual child. Can you do this a different way? And that might be a way of beginning to remove that scaffolding. I think also, though, just thinking about the small steps through the learning, you should, over time, as you're planning a sequence of lessons, be looking for those opportunities to begin to remove the scaffolds slowly. So, we're not letting anybody fall from the top of the building, are we? That we're going to take it down slowly and reduce them to the point where they're no longer needed. And maybe some children at that point might need some more specific adaptations because they've not quite kept up with everybody else. But that should be on a very individual basis. I think my concern is that I'm starting to see, anecdotally, admittedly, but starting to see sort of shoots of differentiation where we've got, this child is working on this worksheet with this scaffold, this child's working on this task with this scaffold, this child's working on a different task and they don't need any support. And all of a sudden, we've got 3 layers of differentiation back in the classroom. And the problem, as we know with that, is that it opens up gaps that never, ever close. And
Yeah.
so, not every child is getting access to the same learning. And that's, that doesn't seem right to me.
No, and I think we do that in maths education, probably in other areas as well. When a word or a phrase is like, well, actually, we shouldn't be using that anymore for these reasons. Something else replaces it, but that something else didn't necessarily mean the same. They weren't interchangeable, but it's just easier to replace it with something and then move on rather than really understanding what the issue was in the first place and how we can
Yes. Yeah. We
meet the
we
need in a
don't
different
we
way.
don't do differentiation at this school, but what we do have is 3 layers of scaffolding, 3 different tiers of
Exactly
scaffolding,
that.
and children start off at different points depending on whether they need the scaffolding or not. And you think, well, yeah, okay, you're saying the same thing using different words.
Yeah.
Um, and, for the first, I don't know, 8 years of my teaching career, certainly I differentiated multiple ways for the children in my class.
Mhm.
So it's not like that was, that was always terrible practice. And there will be times where individual children need, as we've said, specific adaptations, and that's part of inclusion. It would not be an inclusive approach to try and force all the children to do exactly the same thing when some of them are not ready for it yet. My argument is that that's quite a small proportion in most classrooms that might need those specific adaptations. And actually, the vast majority, with the correct scaffolding in place, should be able to access the core learning that's age appropriate. So, yeah, I think it's just something for people to be aware of. And when SLT, school advisors, whoever it is, might say, what scaffolds do you have in place? I think we should be talking about the things that are in place for everybody in the class as part of a carefully sequenced uh, journey of learning, I suppose. I'm not sure why I said journey of learning there, Becky, rather than learning journey, but there you go.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, there's my little John's rant for the week, I think. But it's just, I think it is something that we just need to be aware of a little bit, and make sure that we're all talking about the same thing, which would be helpful, wouldn't it? We talk about how important it is for children to have consistency across a school and across a curriculum. I think for teachers as well, having that same language mean the same thing is really important too.
Yeah, I agree. It's very current. I think people are talking about it now and using those terms now. And in a current climate where there's not an awful lot of CPD necessarily going on, it's important that teachers know what words they're using for what and what they mean, so we're all coming from the same page. So yeah, no, it was a
If we
good
can
rant.
help with that, Becky, we will. Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, but we'll leave it there. If anybody has anything that they would like to add to that conversation on scaffolding or on specific adaptations, or if you want to share what scaffolding looks like in your school, please do get in touch. It's been great to have people get in touch this week, and we'll come to your correspondence, Becky, later. But it is, if you want to get in touch, it's primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk. It's Twinkle without an E, of course, or find us on social media. We're pretty much anywhere you might tend to look. Just search for myself, John Cripwell, or the Primary Maths Podcast, and you'll find ways to get in touch with us.
So I think you have some very interesting history of maths to share with us, John. I'm intrigued by this one.
Yeah, I went down yet another rabbit hole with this one, Becky. So I was talking to a teacher earlier this week, actually, in London, Amy, and she said that she'd listened to the podcast, she'd listened to us talk about time. She said that we ought to look into the mystery of the missing 11 days. It's not really a mystery, but I'm going to set it up as one. So, Becky, imagine you go to bed one night and you wake up to find that 11 days have passed. So you go to bed one night, and the next time you wake up, 11 days have just gone by. And not only that, Becky, it's not even the end of term. Okay, it's not just because you were exhausted at the end of term. It's just the start of September. How would you feel about that?
I mean, yeah, that sounds crazy. I mean, extreme tiredness does make you feel like you've lost days sometimes, but I don't think it's ever been as severe as 11 days, John.
Yeah, just 11 days gone from your life. So if you think half term flies by, then you ought to spare a thought for the people of Britain in 1752, because they went to bed on the 2nd of September, and when they woke up, it was the 14th of September. Same amount of sleep. They hadn't actually slept for 11 days, but those 11 days were just gone. Okay, so that was 1752. But Becky, so we're not just going back a couple of hundred years for this one, Becky. We need to go all the way back to Roman times. I know we have talked about Roman times before, although I also understand Roman times covers quite a long span of history. So specifically, we're going back to 46 BC or BCE. Do you know who the emperor was on the throne? I'm not sure you should say on the throne, but the emperor in charge of Roman, the Roman Empire at the time?
I mean, I would guess a Caesar, but I don't know precisely.
So, it was our old friend Julius Caesar. So he was in charge at the time, and it's fair to say things were a little bit chaotic when it came to keeping track of time. It's our old friend time again. There was all sorts of confusion around seasons, around when special events and gods days and things were noted, and so he decided we need to do something about this. And one of his jobs as emperor was to try and instill some order into things. So he decided to reform the way that the calendar was used, and create what became the Julian calendar, named after Julius Caesar, of course. So the first step to do this was to realign the start of the calendar year. And he decided to make January the start of the year. Okay, now that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yep.
That's as we understand it. Hold on to that thought, because January does not does not remain for most of the intervening period a part of the New Year plans. But when Julius Caesar started, he started with January being the start of the new year. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and in order to do that, he had to make 46 BC 445 days long. So just so he had to,
Goodness.
they had a very, very long year that year. It just went on, and we've all had teaching years like that, haven't we? Where I think it just feels like it's never going to end. But that particular year really did stretch out.
So what did they call those extra days? Or did they just keep it going and then restart? This is mind-blowing.
They just sort of, because they had to take it back a little bit, the year just didn't end when it was supposed to, because it was kind of, they recovered some of the months, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, okay.
So he was working, Julius Caesar was working on the assumption that the year, the amount of time it takes for the Earth to, orbit the sun, is 365 and a quarter days. And that's kind of what we teach as well, isn't it? That's why we have leap years. However, it's slightly more complex than that. The universe didn't make things in quite such a nice, neat little package as that, unfortunately. The real solar year is about 365.24237 days. Now, that's very close to 365 and a quarter. It's out by roughly 11 minutes a year. Okay, so 11 minutes a year. Doesn't seem like a huge problem, does it? And certainly for Julius Caesar, while he was in charge, it really wasn't a problem. However, by the time centuries and in fact millennia have passed, and let's say roughly 1600 years, suddenly all those 11 minutes have added up, and there is again chaos in particularly in Europe, we have to say, around the sort of 1500s. Easter, and this was one of the problems, because by this point in the 1600s, the 1500s, Europe was by and large a very Catholic place, and Easter had kind of wandered from where it was supposed to be, and was somewhere entirely different, into the wrong season, essentially. Things became a bit of a mess. And added to this, in the 9th century, many countries, including Britain, had switched from January being the start of the year to March being the start of the year. So the new year started in March. And this was off the back of some work of some fairly questionable mathematics by a chap called Dionysius, by a chap called Dionysius Exiguus, who was a 6th century monk. I'm only going to say that name once. A 6th century monk. He was sort of best known for introducing Anno Domini, so AD, into the year numbering system. We've talked about this before as well, Becky, actually, because he calculated as best as he could, not especially accurately, we have to say, the year of Christ's birth, and he made that 1 AD, and there was no 0. If you remember, we talked about this. So you go from 1 BC to 1 AD and nothing in between. So he's responsible for that. He also calculated when he believed Christ was born, which is where we get Christmas on the 25th of December. And therefore, he counted back 9 months to the 25th of March, which he called when Christ was conceived, or the Annunciation. And that's why he argued that the year should start at that point when the Annunciation was made. So, being a Christian continent at the time, lots of people slowly moved towards his way of thinking, and certainly by the 1500s, most of Europe was recognizing the 25th of March as the start of the new year.
So, sorry, I don't want to take you off track, because this is already very confusing. So, at what point were the months named? Is this why, for example, September, which sounds like it should be the 7th month, is actually the 9th month? Was it once the 7th month? That might be a question for another day.
That would be a question for another day. My research, Becky, has not taken me to answer that question yet, but I wouldn't be
I'll look it
surprised
up
if
for
this
next
was.
week.
I think it's all been, yeah, please do. I think this has all been a consequence of a lot of meddling and messing with a system that was
Yeah,
broken and did need fixing.
and who sorts it out? Who
So the
sorts?
man who comes to the rescue, as it were, was the Pope, and specifically Pope Gregory the 13th, if I can read my Roman numerals correctly. He said in 1582, we need to fix this because I'm not happy that Easter isn't where it's supposed to be, and all sorts of things have gone wrong. So he introduced, guess what he called it? This new calendar. It's Pope Gregory.
The Gregorian calendar.
Gregorian calendar.
It all falls into place.
So lots of countries adopted this immediately because, it was decreed by the Pope. The Pope was a very powerful man, particularly in 1582 in continental Europe. But in 1582, that required messing with days as well. So the 4th of October, 1582 was followed by the 15th of October the next day. So they dropped some days as well in order to reset things. And he had recognized, or somebody for Pope Gregory had recognized, that this 365 and a quarter days thing wasn't quite accurate. So he introduced, along with his calendar, a new leap year rule, which was that there's a leap year every 4 years, so an extra day in February every 4 years, except century years, unless that century is divisible by 400. So, yeah, again, very convoluted. And, Becky, I have to say, still not perfect, although it's only out by a few seconds each year now. But over the course, again, of millennia, I think something like 19,000 years or something, we could end up in a mess again. So look out for another change. Anyway, you'll notice that this was happening in Europe in 1582. Britain, I said, didn't change anything until 1752. Any idea why Britain was sort of reluctant to change to this newfangled calendar?
I mean, I don't know. How very confusing to not be on the same calendar as other countries. I don't know.
No, well, it was political to an extent and also religious, because at that time Britain was a Protestant country. So no pope was going to come calling the shots and saying what the date was supposed to be in that time. So absolutely not. So for nearly 200 years, there was all sorts of calendar shenanigans going on when it came to figuring out the dates, and lots of I've seen some letters and things written at the time in sort of the early 1700s, and people were writing the date like a fraction. So they were putting one date at the top, so say the 19th of January, and then a line, a 19th stroke, whatever it was, the 10th of January underneath it, depending if you were writing to somebody who was using the Julian calendar or the Gregorian calendar.
Wow.
And in the middle of the month, that wasn't so bad. But sometimes you would have, somebody was in one month and somebody else was in another month. And then, because Britain was still using March as the start of the new year, sometimes people on continental Europe were in 1 year and Britain for 3 months was in another year. So dates, lots and lots of dates from around that time, dates of battles and dates of people being born and dying and things, are not really that accurate because, the dates were sort of messed around with. So finally, in 1752, the British legislature finally stepped in, decided, okay, enough time's passed now. Pope Gregory's long gone. It's not him calling the shots anymore, but it seems silly to still be continuing with different dates. We will, put the new year back to January from March, and we will adopt the Gregorian calendar. And in order to do so, they had to take 11 days out of September that year.
So what about those 11 lost days then? Did you still get paid? I mean, you hadn't done any work, would you?
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah, I'm still expecting a full month's salary at the end of September this year.
Yeah, but also paying for things.
Yeah, well, yeah. So rents and things. So they did think about this. I mean, for give them their due. Parliament did think about this as they were doing this. They did look ahead and think, what are the potential consequences here? So they did say you could only charge and be paid for the days that actually existed to that month. So it was a little bit prorated. But if your birthday fell between the 2nd and the 14th of September, then what happens then? Were you just lost a birthday that year? And even if your birthday wasn't then, I suppose because of those missing 11 days, if you celebrated on the 2nd of January one year and the 2nd of January the next,
You weren't
365
a
days
year.
hadn't actually passed, had they? That you were not actually a solely year older, uh, I suppose. So,
I
although trying to
know.
work all that out would have been very
And
confusing.
I wonder how far in advance they planned it. You could have made a plan for the
Well, it was
10th of
about a year.
September.
It was about a year. So
Okay, so
they
you
decided
wouldn't have
this in
made plans.
1751 and they did it in 1752. But I think the other thing that you've got to bear in mind is just the speed of communication at the time. I wonder how long it took everybody to realise that these 11 days, it's not like they were broadcasting it on the TV or the radio or, or on the internet, sending emails out around it. It would have taken quite a while, I think, for everybody to catch up and still be on the same calendar. So I'm guessing there was even more confusion around the late 1700s in terms of what the date was. I mean, I struggle knowing what the date is now, and I've got phones, computers
Yeah,
and everything else telling me all the time, but I still forget what day it is. I feel for the people in 1752 because I'm guessing they wouldn't have had a clue what day of the week it was, or even what year it was in
confusing.
some cases. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but it was a thank you, Amy, because that was brilliant to dive into a little bit. I apologise if I lost anybody along the way. There was a lot of information there, I know, but go back and listen to it again. Maybe it'll make sense the second time round. But I really, I really enjoyed finding out about that. And as I say, lots of dates that we think of, things happening on a particular anniversary before kind of the mid 1700s didn't necessarily happen on that date at all. Things have really been moved around quite a lot.
wow. I mean, yes, a little confusing, but really interesting. Thanks for sharing that, John. Yeah, that was great.
Lovely. Well, if you've got any thoughts on that, do get in touch. Um, not to complain, though, please. I thought it was interesting, and I'm glad I could share it with you. So we have had people get in touch, though. Again, not to complain, just to share some of their money stories. Because last week's episode, AfterMaths episode, we talked about teaching money and how money has sort of changed the way that we spend money and things over the years has changed. And so we had a few people get in touch just to share things that they'd had happened to them or things that they'd noticed. So the first one starts, Dearest Becky and John. I quite like that, Dearest. I hope this finds you well. I was listening to last week's episode regarding the teaching of money, and it put me in mind of a certain financial loophole currently being exploited by my own two sons. Always interested to hear about financial loopholes. I'm hoping this can be broadcast, Becky. It's not going to get anybody in trouble with HMRC or anybody else. So we recently sat down to curate the annual birthday wish list, a document that in our house is treated with the same bureaucratic reverence as a SATS question level analysis spreadsheet. Just had a little shiver go through my spine there.
Yeah.
Thought of that. However, I noticed a curious trend in their selections. Anything involving a high ticket price point or a significant drain on the family exchequer was conspicuously absent. They were just asking for cheap things, Becky, which I'm not sure I would have queried that at all. Actually,
No,
no
run
questions
with it.
asked. Lovely. You want some bubble gum? Fantastic. We'll do that.
Yes.
My daughter, by the way, incidentally, couldn't decide what she wanted for Christmas. She went for, in the end, chocolate and cheese. And she received both of those.
Love
So,
it. That sounds like the perfect gift to me.
yeah, it was fine by me too. Anyway, this is from Josh. Josh did query this sudden onset of fiscal restraints, as he puts it. My eldest looked at me with the pity one usually reserved for a man who has forgotten how to do column subtraction. Oh no, he explained, we're saving the expensive stuff for the Christmas list because it saves you guys money as Santa pays for those. which is lovely, isn't it? What a lovely thought. How nice.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't argue with that either, can you? What
No.
fantastic logic. Um,
Yeah.
Josh says it appears I'm raising two master accountants who have successfully identified a way to subsidise their lifestyle via via a non-domiciled bearded benefactor in the Arctic. I can only assume that in their minds the North Pole operates as a sort of high-volume, zero-cost manufacturing hub that bypasses the standard laws of supply and demand. I think that is a lovely story. Thank you so much, Josh. He says, keep up the great work. Yeah, I like that a lot, Becky. Very difficult to argue with.
Absolutely. I love that logic.
Yeah, child logic is it's often, impeccable, if not entirely logical.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Josh.
Mm.
We also had Pav in Derby got in touch with us,
Ooh,
and he
down the
said,
road.
hi both. I was recently forced to explain the harsh realities of household economics to my 6-year-old son on a festive trip to our local farm park. I feel like Christmas is the time for all these conversations, isn't it?
Yeah, although going to a farm at Christmas, that sounds chilly.
Cold.
But yeah.
After I informed him that we simply didn't have the funds for yet another plastic dinosaur, he looked at me as if I were an idiot. He does this a lot. Again, there's a running theme here between parents and their children.
Yeah.
Sorry, I inadvertently said Pav was a he. It's actually a she. Apologies, Pav. Mum, he sighed, gesturing towards my mobile. You don't need money. Just tap your phone.
Yeah. No, well, this is what we were talking about last week, wasn't it, Becky? That you don't see money, actual physical money anymore. It just lives on somebody's phone. Tap the phone and you can buy whatever you like.
Pav goes on to say that it obviously appears that in his eyes, her smartphone is not just for playing games and taking photos, but a magical wand that summons goods and services from the ether with a simple tap, if only. She says, I'm now terrified that he views me not as his mum, but as a woman who is willfully withholding the infinite bounty of the contactless beep. I love it.
Right,
I mean, it's true, isn't it? She thanks us again for reminding her about children's misconceptions. And yes, I feel like there's lots of child-related stories here, which is probably not surprising because that's what we were saying, weren't we? It's that understanding of what money actually is.
What lovely teachable moments, Becky. Eh?
Yeah.
They just present themselves in the real world. Last one then, dear Jon and Becky. This is from Sam. Doesn't say where are you, Sam? You ought to tell us where you're from. Your podcast on teaching money reminded me of a time when I bore witness to a scene on my at my nearest bank, brackets now in the next town. Yes, I don't have a local bank anymore either. They're disappearing, aren't they? Another way that money is changing, and children are seeing things less. I remember going to the bank loads with my mum as a kid to cash checks and things.
Yeah, paying in slips and all of that.
As I was queuing to pay in some Christmas money. Showing off there, Sam, getting cash for Christmas. A small child, eyes fixed on the bank's cash machine, turned to his mum, tugged on her sleeve and made a perfectly reasonable request. Can we get some of that money from that machine? When the mother replied that they didn't need any cash and anyway she'd run out of spending money over Christmas, you can imagine that conversation, we've spent enough at Christmas. The child didn't miss a beat. He pointed a steady finger at the glowing neon sign above the machine and declared, but it says it's free cash. Which, you do get those, don't you, on the cash machines, free cash withdrawals. Yeah, free cash. I wish it was, Becky. I really was. I really do. So Sam points out this is another moment of logic, child logic. Would love to hear some more child logic, please. If you've had, you must have teaching or just with your own children, heard some examples of child logic that left you defeated as a parent. We would love to hear it, please, because it makes us feel better about ourselves. But that was from Sam. Again, doesn't say where he's from or she's from. But thank you, Sam, for sending that in. We really do appreciate hearing from you. Please do get in touch. Primary Maths Podcast at twinkle.co.uk. Again, on social media. Any child logic that you would like to share with us, we are here for it, definitely. So, Becky, shall we do a whistle-stop tour through the problem-solving takeaways from earlier this week? I was delighted to be joined by Steve Lomax and Tom Manners. Just before Christmas, we recorded that, and we were talking all about problem-solving. And honestly, it could have been a 3-hour episode. I think it was an hour and 15 as it was. But I just didn't want to cut anything out of it because it was all really good stuff. Now, Becky, I know problem-solving is very much your passion and something that you've spent a lot of time working on recently. So I'm really interested. What were your takeaways from that particular episode?
Yeah, it was a great episode, John, and it certainly didn't feel like it was that long. And I felt like I could have quite happily listened to double the amount of time. But then problem solving is a passion of
Don't
mine.
tempt me, Becky. Don't
No,
tempt me.
I know. Yeah, so I've kept it. I could go on and on about the takeaways, but I have kept it very brief. So the first thing I think I noticed was the mention of mindset and how that actually mindset has a huge role actually in effective problem solving. We are often talking about maths, conceptual understanding and knowledge, but the mindset here is really important, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Huge. And not necessarily something to teach, but something that you can cultivate as a teacher, I think, and you can model and you can look out for. So yeah,
Yeah,
having that positive growth mindset, you might call it, I suppose,
definitely.
and not thinking that you've got to find an answer immediately, but that you're going to work through something and thinking about it in those terms, I think can have a big difference to how children approach problem solving.
Definitely. And the other thing was there was lots of talk around teaching of strategies and things, and you sort of touched upon this, that at the start of a year, before you even start thinking about the specific strategies for solving problems, there's other things that children need to know to be able to do, or have things to help them to do them, like working collaboratively and communicating. It feels like the start of the year, I know we're in January now, but it's a very good time to start working on those skills, not just for maths actually, but maybe particularly relevant to the area of problem solving.
Yeah, absolutely. Those sort of skills and behaviours that you want to see children using in order to, and I think this goes hand in hand with your previous point about mindset. Really, those are the two of the key things that, as you say, are not necessarily strategies, but have a huge impact on the actual problem solving uh, approach that children might have, I suppose. So yeah, absolutely. Um, Any other points that you wanted to make, Becky?
I'll share one more, John, which was the power of noticing and wondering, that glorious curiosity that your guests talked about so well. And I think we are seeing a classroom shift, aren't we? But I think still there's a little bit of an overhang of having evidence of things. And that can be a really hard thing to evidence, can't it? I mean, unless you're videoing and writing everything down, which of course you wouldn't do because it would take away from the moment. But really capturing that noticing and wondering can be quite hard. You would eventually see it, of course, in problem solving done later on, but quite a difficult one to capture, I thought.
Yeah, and this is where I think it's important to remember that we are employed as professional people and teachers and not just evidence gatherers, and that there are things that you know about your pupils that just are not captured in any sort of assessment, but it helps inform you as a teacher as to how you're going to help them next. And those things are really, really, really important. And so we shouldn't be doing things just so that we've got something evidenced on a piece of paper or even on a photo stuck into a book or even in a video. We just need to do the things and trust the process sometimes. And as you say, Becky, if you do those things, the outcomes will eventually show, won't they? Might not be
Yeah.
as part of that lesson. You're not, and this was an argument I used to have with anybody who was to come into school and say, well, can you evidence progress within a lesson? I don't I don't care about progress within a lesson.
No.
I want progress, over a year, over the school time that the children are there. That's where the progress happens. You're not going to necessarily need to see it in a book over, at the start of the lesson they couldn't do this, at the end of the lesson they could. I think that's a really, really poor way of judging the effectiveness of teaching and learning in a classroom. And actually
Yeah.
what you want to be able to do is to see over time is that child making progress? Can they know more and remember more and do more than they used to be able to do? But to boil that down to, 45 minutes or 50 minutes to try and see that journey is pointless. So I would argue with anybody who says that you need to have lots of evidence for every single lesson. I think that's why that sort of move towards that is one of the reasons that we don't see enough problem solving happening in schools anymore, because people don't feel there's time for it.
No, and it comes down to trust, doesn't it? Trusting the professionals who really do know what they're doing, and it's hoping that the SLT or powers above them have that trust and allow time to see that impact and outcomes, because it doesn't happen overnight, like you say.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks again to Steve and to Tom for joining us for that. And if you haven't listened to it yet, I really would urge you to go back and give it a listen, because I think it was a great episode about a topic that is going to be front and center of the new curriculum when it comes out. There's lots to talk about problem solving there. And it's just fundamental to maths generally, really. That's what maths is about creating people who can solve problems. And as you say, Becky, not just mathematical problems, just problems generally. That's what we need, certainly the next generation, to be able to do. So again, thank you so much to Steve and Tom, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk about problem solving. But next week on the podcast, on Tuesday's episode, we've got Dominique from Sums, S-U-M, Sums of Anarchy. You see what they did there. Who, if you haven't come across before, I would advise you, before next week's episode, go and check out some of their content on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, probably on Facebook as well, I would imagine. Sums of Anarchy, go and have a look at what she does, and that will really help you to understand where we're coming from in the interview, where we talk about how to engage pupils in maths lessons, which is something I'm thinking about this year particularly. Becky, how do we make sure that maths lessons are engaging and interesting and something that the children want to take part in? So that will be on Tuesday. In the meantime, if you haven't already, we would, as ever, appreciate and love a like for this video if you're watching on YouTube, or a subscription. Just hit the subscribe button if you are following us on Apple or Spotify or YouTube. And do you know what, Becky? If they could leave a review, even just a star review, it would be absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it would. We love hearing from you as well. Thank you so much for sending in your stories. We'd love to hear more. It's a great thing to talk about on the podcast. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. We will see you next week.
Bye for now.